Hello. So, got some whiskey tonight. You see, I don't know why they put these things on it when you buy them from the store, but I like it. I like this thing. I even keep them. I keep these things and put them back in my bottles. I think these are awesome. I think it's just for transporting your drink from the store. But we have tonight the famous grass, which is a nice little blend. My father happens to like this. He did. In preference to other blends, he much preferred malts. Let's get this straight. Scotsman drinks malt whiskey, not blends. But for a cheap blend, you know, the famous grouse was definitely up there. And I'm technically not a whiskey drinker, but you know, I'm got a cold right now anyway, so I have the excuse to drink some whiskey. But the famous grouse is blended Scotch whiskey, the finest Scotch whiskies, expertly blended and matured in seasoned oak casks for a rich rounded sweetness. And so my father would drink this. I always liked the shape of the bottles. It was always little. It's actually a bit more knobbly than I remember it up here. Kind of interesting though. But the famous grouse. Yeah, Matthew Glog is signed up here. So good product. It's quite affordable. You know, established in 1800. You know, good old whiskey company. So actually, let me just read the spiel from the back. The famous grouse. Blending premium whiskey isn't just something we do. It has been the foundation of our craft since 1800. We bring together the finest ingredients to create a natural spirit before the passing of time imparts the wonderful flavour from our handcrafted casks. And add to this the fusion of skilled craftsmen and a tenacious obsession with quality, and you arrive at our famous, rich, sweet, well-rounded whiskey. Please enjoy responsibly. That's fair enough. But I've got an interesting story anyway. My old grandaunt she spent her whole career in whiskey, working. That's terrible, doesn't it? No, she was a non-drinker. She was totally teetotal. My grandaunt, she wouldn't. No, alcohol would not pass her lips. That's ironic, really, but that's how it is. That was the part of Scotland she lived. You know, you either worked in whiskey or you didn't. You know, and she lived in the hill foots at the foot of the Ochil Hills, and the industry there is basically whiskey. You know, you work in the distilleries, and she worked in the distilleries and pretty much headed one right into her retirement. But she was a crafty old lady. She had some great stories to tell about whiskey. And one of my favourite stories about her was, I was just thinking, I hadn't opened a browser before I get into this, and I'm going through OBS, which makes it very hard to do almost anything with, to be quite honest. You know, I'm in OBS anyway, so I can't really monitor anything that's going on, unfortunately. We'll just carry on. What can you do? So anyway, whiskey. My old grandaunt. So now they had some fine single malts in that distillery, and you pay heavily for those. I mean, it's like a big money, big money. This is like cheap. This is cheap blended whiskey. Not knocking it. It's a good product of my country. I want to put something straight here. Whiskey in Scotland does not have an E in it. It's whiskey. This is what differentiates between Scottish and Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey has an E in it. Whiskey, K-E-Y. In Scotland, it's just whiskey, K-Y. So, and that's how it is. Oh, and I should have pointed out the best bit of all about this. And this is I can tell you a great story about this in a minute. It's by appointment to Her Majesty the Queen. Scotch whiskey blended, Matthew Glog and Sons. You can see the royal appointment at the top here. See? And it's a quite interesting story about royal appointments. I'll just step aside and tell that story because it's great. My friend from Rossi, my college friend, And his uncle had a fish shop there, and they sold fish and things like that. And one time, the Prince of Wales was visiting. He was a young man. You know, the Prince of Wales happens to love Scotland, and he spent a lot of time there in his youth. And the Prince of Wales came in, and he had what he bought was given an abroad smoky, which is a kind of fish smoked. What is a smoky? Is it a haddock? I'm not quite sure. They taste delicious though. I think they taste like chicken. Doesn't everything taste like chicken? But if you do it right, I used to know a man who had a hotel, and he did a lot of fishing on Loch Long. And when he would bring his catch back to the hotel, he would smoke it in the back in the smoker. And in the evening, like a typical Saturday night when people are in there having a beer or whiskey or whatever, he would come in and say, "Does anyone want to eat some smokies?" And they would bring them on, just trays of these things for free, and they were quite delicious, and they made an awesome thing to tuck into late at night. But what always amazed me was how much that when it was smoked, it tastes like you could probably pass it for like some kind of fowl. I don't know. It's like so very interesting. Anyway, back to smokies. So the Prince of Wales had apparently come in and had an Arbroath smoky, and then about a month or two later, they got this letter through the door, and it said, your place has been by royal appointment. You can stick this on your board or whatever, and this is a big thing. You get something by royal appointment is, on any product, anything, a service that's maybe someone from the royal family's tried and liked, and basically you get this thing, and it's your place almost becomes a little pilgrimage for tourists, and more people stop, and it gets you business, absolutely. So they were, dumbstruck, frankly, that the Prince of Wales had enjoyed his smoky so much, and I believe, this is as far as the story I know, it's not my story, as I say, it's my friend's. He used to say that whenever the Queen went to Balmoral, they would deliver a package of smokies and whatever to and that's as far as I know. That's a great story. But my old granddad, Aunt Kath, she was fascinating because she was, as I say, she was in charge of a whiskey bond for her retirement. And what she used to do was play a very cheeky game at New Year's. She would get, all the expensive whiskey bottles, and she would fill it with the cheapest whiskey you could imagine. It wasn't because she was mean or anything, it's because it was her and her husband, loved to. That was their joke. That was the joke on everybody. In Scotland, of course, you play at New Year, you go into people's houses at New Year and you first fit them, and basically you drink a lot and whatever. And she would have the respectable blends like this and the real thing, but she'd have a couple of real ones there too. As I say, she was not a drinker, not at all. No, very very Presbyterian old lady, and she definitely wouldn't, which is kind of ironic, but there you are. It's business, isn't it? So her husband, on the other hand, he drank like a fish, so it doesn't. It doesn't. So but it was cool. So she'd have all the bottles all laid out on her table, and I'd have all the cheap blends to the very exotic, expensive things, and I mean we're talking expensive. I've got a story about that as well. So, and what's interesting is she would get people, so-called whiskey connoisseurs, coming in, and they would she said, what do you want to try? And they would always go for the single malt, the most expensive whiskey on the table. They would go, "Oh, I'll have that," and they would take a glass of that, and they would, and really, really discuss it. And after what they didn't get is after they went home and went away from her house, and her and her husband used to laugh about it, used to laugh at the pretensions, and I think that's funny. It's very true, isn't it? Because in Scotland, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns, basically. The high or the low, it doesn't matter whether you're the Duke of Atholl or Billy Anderson from Denniston. You know, we're pretty much all one people. But what was amazing about it was, though, you know, everyone always went for the expensive thing, and these guys invariably couldn't tell a blend from a malt, except for one person, my father. And my father went there, and he happened to like this famous grouse. And he's not a very humble man. He wouldn't like say to you, "Give me a glass of your £500 bottle of whiskey." You know, he would say, "Give me a glass of that there." So he would do that. But she said, "Don't you want to try the malt?" And in this occasion, he said, "Okay." And she poured him some malt whiskey, and he spat it out, and he said, "That is not a single malt." And you could tell her, and the whole place, you know, all the house just went quiet, and they looked at him, and my aunt said, she said, "Alistair, you're the first person ever to realise that that's, you know, what it is, you know," and that's how we revealed her little joke. She then had everyone in hysterics when she explained that what was in their glasses was like cheap blended whiskey from the supermarket. And that's a great little story. And it just goes to show, pretentious people, you know, I mean, I have a problem with whiskey connoisseurs, because basically it all tastes the same to me. Whiskey is whiskey. There's a dramatic change, though, between the malts and the blends, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion. But I've always wanted to own a whiskey bar. A Scotsman with a whiskey bar, because I don't drink whiskey. I'm going to drink some whiskey just now. I mean, I'm done. This. I got a cold and other things going on, and I'm just in the mood. I've been sleeping well lately. And, which is no excuse for drinking, incidentally. I'm not a drinker. I'm very, very rarely do I drink. So let's get my little trusted glass of you. Have you seen this lately? It's got snowmen on it. I like it. Got this for $1 in Walmart. Come on. So let's crack it open. The famous grouse. I love this sound. Don't you love that sound? Isn't that fantastic? I hope my mic picked that up. Well, the one thing about whiskey is whatever it tastes like, I always thought the smell was fantastic. Same with brandy. You ever really smelled brandy? You put your nose to it and you get that smell. That is a fantastic, fantastic odour. Excuse me. Really, truly fantastic. So, let's pour what's called a half in Scotland. About half, isn't it? I think that's about half. Yeah, maybe a little more than a half as such. And we'll put this on. Now, I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to first of all drink it as it is, and then I'm going to do it exactly as my father always did it, and add some water to it. He generally did with his whiskies, but not his single malts. No, not at all. So, Slanchivar. Very palatable. Famous Grouse is it's a whiskey I could definitely drink. As I say, I'm not a whiskey drinker, but my cousin, she puts Pepsi in this, which I think is revolting. I don't think you should put anything like that in it. I could some people argue lemonade. Well, when I say lemonade, I mean well, to Americans it would be the closest thing to Sprite, because it's not lemonade as such. What's called lemonade in Britain is practically Sprite. It's like I think Sprite's the closest thing. Lemon and limey drink. But it's very palatable. I see that. With the right amount of heat, and it's not bad. But let's put a little spot of water in it. There you go. You know, this is interesting. If you're ever in a second-hand store and you find maybe it's usually a jug type thing, let's start with the water. It's lunch again. Oh yeah, I get that. I see why my father did water it down. It takes the bite off it. That's really actually quite nice. Really good. That's awesome. a little honey in that right now. It would help my cold bundle, I tell you. That is really quite nice. Anyway, so if you're ever in a junk store, second-hand store, wherever, and you find that it's a water jug. Yeah, they're typical serving jug, pitcher type thing. And they'd have a name on it like the Famous Grouse or Scotch White Mackay or something. Buy it, pounce on it. Those things are worth money. They're very collectible. And it's quite ironic because there was a time when they were like everywhere. You could find them everywhere. But today, it's very hard to find good whiskey water jugs. You know, the water jug, and very collectible if they're old. My mother had many of the stoneware containers with the stopper. Many should have a huge collection of them. And she gave a lot away. Gave a lot away to people, and I'd rather she didn't, because those are worth money today. Those are really. I mean, I would have, if they were mine, I would have displayed them. I would have displayed those, but she had a lot. Big collection of them, some of them quite old. And those, again, are also collectible. Go watch for those. But I think the water jugs, to a lesser degree, the ashtrays. I'm not a smoker. I don't like ashtrays. I don't even want the thing in my house, because it would encourage somebody else to light up, and don't do it. Don't smoke anywhere near me. Just don't do it. So I'm not a smoker. But definitely the whiskey jugs are awesome. If I only had one in the room with me here right now, I'd show you what they look like. But you can certainly Google them. But if you're ever in, as I say, if you're ever in like a Goodwill or something, and you come across something with a whiskey name on the bottle, on the side of it, particularly Scotch whiskies, buy it. 1 minute till I get my heater. It's driving me mad here. So, because that's definitely collectible, worth quite a bit of money. And it's interesting that they've kind of moved from sort of working class houses to posh houses, that people now boast about having this thing, in the house. And we used to have lots of them. We got from all over the place. We used to, some thing my mother was involved in, she'd be able to get the actual container. I mean, there was never any whiskey in the one she got. They were brand new from where the factories they were under, and she was able to get these, and so they quite a collection. And we also lived quite close to a whiskey bonds at one point, and that was a fascinating place. There's like those places are like Fort Knox. In fact, as my grand aunt used to like to say, talking about where she lived, right behind her was whiskey bonds, all these things right across the field from behind her, and she used to like to say, that's liquid gold over there, and it was liquid gold. But back to what I was saying about me and my relationship to this. I don't really have one. Because I'm not a whiskey drinker as such. I do like this. I do like a glass of Drambuie. And I'm not saying Drambuie is my favourite either, because my favourite is actually something else, which I just seem unable to locate here in America. It's called Dvckvla. Dvckvla is like, if you like Drambuie, you'd love Dvckvla. It tastes so much better. I always felt Drambuie was just a little sweet. There's a spiciness to Dvckvla. I like it. I just like it. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the whiskey base for Drambuie is Chivas Regal, which is quite a good whiskey in its own right. It's a very good whiskey. But again, let's have a little snifter of the Famous Grouse. Once again, I'll show you the bottle in case you're interested in looking at this for your specs or whatever. That's what you're looking for. Just a minute. Bit of a issue happening there. Yeah, spilled a little bit. No matter. This desk is not the Famous Grouse. There you are. Well, let's just fix that. It's a little bit more whiskey there. Had it on the edge and it didn't work too well. Okay, there you go. So the Famous Grouse, quite affordable. portable whiskey. Be able to get it in Specs or Goody Goody or whatever you've got near you. That's a shame. Just lost some liquid gold to the carpet. That's that's about it really. I was just gonna talk about whiskey. Yeah, my own opinion. Well, I'd like to someday invest in a whiskey bar. I'd go the whole hog. I'm talking about. I've got the location for it. I think I know where I would do it. Got a lot of oil CEOs in there, and we'd I envisage it like a, the regular bar for the regular punters, and in the back though a separate private room for functions, whiskey tasting, and occasional things like bagpipers and stuff like that. No, all I need, I think if I find an Irishman, that'll be my partner. He can attend to the Irish whiskies, I'll attend to the Scotch whiskies, and between us we'll make a killing, I think. So that's a good idea. But I think it's like the best person to run a whiskey bar is someone that doesn't drink whiskey. Me. See what I'm saying? So, because I can tell you it can go the wrong way. I know of a man in Scotland, oddly enough, and he had some kind of thing like that going on, and he drunk like a fish. This is the guy who owned the place, and you would buy a whiskey, he'd have a whiskey. You go to the bar, then the next person you go in, he'd have a whiskey. You buy a whiskey, he'd buy a whiskey, and this guy, he was like paralytic drunk, got to the end of the night, he's standing there, you're pouring your own whiskey, he's like, whoa. He was the barman, he's the guy, he's so drunk you couldn't even pour it. He's like, you just go in and help yourself, and you go in and you go, okay. And but sadly he had a sad ending. Because well, it's like all things, isn't it? You shouldn't abuse anything in this life. I am neither for alcohol nor against it. I believe I have very liberal opinions in this world. If you just don't, everything in moderation, perfectly fine. But I'd like to say that about the older days. Does drinking whiskey make you smarter? Some people claim it does. And it's partly true, and I'm going to explain that. It's got a good side and a bad side, but it's good to know. I mean, certainly, when I was younger, going into college years, what I used to do was eat glucose tablets right before the exam, and this sounds bizarre to a lot of people. They think, what? That's crazy. No, you got a sugar rush. And I would go in for, I don't know if it works on everyone, but it worked on me. I'd go in and I would just, everything I could write, I'd just scribble it down on the side of the paper, scribble all the things down I've struggled to memorize for weeks. And then I would look at the exam. Does that make sense? Scribble down, oh yeah, that. And this is how I did it. And anyway, and whiskey's a bit like that, apparently. If you drink whiskey for about 5 minutes, you're smarter. This is incredibly true. Now, is that true? Yes, it is, apparently. There's a reason for it, and there's also a bad reason for it. And because a glass of whiskey, you apparently kills like 5,000 of your brain cells, which is thankfully you have many millions of brain cells. But still, let's think about it. So you got all these brain cells, at the front, and they, they've lived a life and they've got a bit of life in them yet, but the whiskey apparently zaps those, and the brand new ones right behind it take over. So for a few minutes, you're absolutely smarter. So perhaps the answer is to drink whiskey before you go into the exam. Doesn't always work. When I was at school, I remember doing it was my maths exam. Oh my god, I couldn't sleep a wink. I was so worried about that exam. And I'm walking around the house in the dark at 3 a.m. and my dad was awake because I was awake, and stomping around, and he came and he said to me, "What you need is whiskey." Whiskey, that'll put you to sleep, he said, and that'll be great. And so he gave me a big glass of whiskey and a cup of tea, and I sat there and I don't know which one it wasn't made me vomit, the tea or the whiskey, but I was like, 16 or 15 or something, drinking this big glass of whiskey, and this was meant to help me sleep, and I was okay. So, and I drank this, and then I went to the exam first thing in the morning, and I think I was drunk, I went into the maths exam drunk, and I was like, looking at it, and I'm going, oh my god, and it's just like, I did manage to get maybe an hour's sleep, which is not enough. And I'll be honest, I got a B for that exam. I think so. Either the whiskey would have got me an A, or without the whiskey rather, or but I was drunk and I sat my mathematics exam. So that's a true story. But I grew up in a household where alcohol. No, my dad, no. He did. He was not an alcoholic. Thank God for that. And he drank in moderation. In fact, he most of the week he wouldn't drink at all. And sometimes a whole month would go by, he'd never have a beer or anything. But a couple of months. But he did. He liked to make wines and beers. He made his own beers, and there was a reason for that. Is that my grandpa had his own wine recipes. And beer recipes. I think my hat's on squint. You like my hat? My golf hat. Got a little line rampant on the front here. See that? Got that, my coat of arms. Anyway, so my grandpa had lots of beer and wine recipes. In fact, one of his recipes was very good. And it was for brown ale. And you may have tried Newcastle brown ale, famous North English drink. But my grandpa had a brown ale recipe that had been passed to him down in the family. It was pretty old, and it was pretty much the very spit of Newcastle brown and ice. So I grew up with it around the house. It was acceptable, and a bit like I've heard of Italian households where the children are given kind of diluted wine or whatever. Well, we had a lot of wine with our meals, weekends and holidays. And mostly because my father made wine, a lot of ingredients he would from all kinds of stuff, sloe berries and the things we'd pick, and oh my god, it's kind of interesting. An interesting collection of fruits. How he would prepare the must and all that, the whole thing, and. I tried a couple of his recipes myself, actually, to see how they came out. I made one of my best stories ever would be my cider I made. I made this cider. Actually, I made several things, I'll tell you. He also had a great recipe for Chablis, and a lovely little Chablis, which was the match of Prosecco. Easy. I'll not be cheeky enough to say champagne, but Prosecco, maybe. So, but he had a great little recipe for things like that. But I tried his apple cider recipe one time. I didn't think much of it. That's an interesting story, a few bottles of this. So, me and my friend drank it, and we didn't think a lot of it. And I just put 2 bottles in the cupboard and thought, well, I'll get to those someday. I'm kind of bored of this. And it was a whole year past, and I had 2 friends coming over to play board games. When we got the board games out, and my friend said, "Don't you still have that old cider we made a year ago?" And I said, "Yeah, do you really want this?" And he said, "Yeah." So we had these 2, it was the British lemonade bottles, they stand about this tall, glass bottle, and there was 2 of those full of this cider, and I went to see it, and I'm looking at it and I thought, wow, what an amazing red colour. I never saw cider so amazing. And there was no sediment at all, or any sediment was totally like congealed in the bottom. It was like solid, wasn't going to interfere with pouring the drink. Like, when you make homebrew or any form of alcohol like that, there's always sediment, especially with pouring it off. But no, I wouldn't have to do that with this. So I said, okay. So, and in those 2 bottles, that made exactly 3 pints. So we got 3 pint glasses, and between the 3 we poured a pint of that each. And I'll tell you something, it was the best cider I have ever tasted. Ever. I mean, ever. And I've tasted a lot of cider. I've been all over the country in the UK, and now in the West Country. People, the West Country cider is very good. Don't get me wrong, it's scrumpy and stuff like that. Those guys know how to make good cider. But this stuff, oh, wow. It's like, the smell was like the richest, sweetest apple you've ever eaten. The taste was just fantastic. And I swear, 1 pint of that, we were all kind of, oh my God, there's no more of it, unfortunately, because we drunk it. But 1 pint was enough to make us drunk, frankly. But the alcohol did not take away the, how sometimes the alcohol content can affect the actual taste of it. Not in this case. It had an incredible taste. It was almost like candy apples or something. I just, wow, and one of my friends, he was last time I spoke to him, I hadn't saw him for years and years, and that was the first thing he thought about. He said, "Do you remember that time we opened that cider?" And I went, "Yeah, I do," because it was so good. So my dad had a lot of good recipes like that. But his brown ale actually was, I'm not quite sure what the deal was though, but it was my grandpa's recipe, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I'm pretty sure that hops don't grow in Scotland. We have to get them over the border from England. So he would have, and then my dad had a friend from the army from Newcastle, oddly enough, and he used to mail my dad the hops for it back in the day when you couldn't get these things readily. I mean, the internet wasn't there. You can just go on and say, "Okay, give me some of this." You can do it. So he would, his friend would mail him a package of this, and it was quite a small package, really. I mean, it was about so big, if I recall, and he would get that, and that's what he would use in his brown ale. And this brown ale was amazing. So I think my brother and I were like the pie-eyed kids in the street, because whenever the alcohol was ready, and the booze was ready to taste, everyone in the house had a taste of it, and so we don't go, "Oh my God, that's good." So, but hey, what harm's it done? I'm not an alcoholic. I really drink, but whatever. So it's everything in moderation. It's like anything. It's like respect for a thing. If you respect a thing, I think that's something. But all these stories about alcohol, it's interesting. In Scotland, we have our culture, our social culture. A lot of people go to bars and hang out, and it's a bit. And everyone does that everywhere. I'll give you that. But no, but to us, it's in like a small town attitude. People tend to congregate around the local pub or the local store. And small towns, you kind of know most social part of the town. It's perhaps a sad thing. One time it would be the church. Not now. Not for a long time. And you meet all sorts. It's actually quite a nice drink. Now I think about it. Actually, not bad at all. I'll certainly finish this. This will probably help me sleep tonight. But a nice, some spirits, kind of burning sensation over it. No, not this. This is really quite nice. And I suppose adding just a tiny bit of water makes a big difference. It's warming. Very nice. So some whiskey stories. There's some great whiskey tours in Scotland. One of the best trips. This is insane. This is quite insane. I don't know if you've ever heard of the West Highland Way, and it's a walk. It's 113 miles. you're into hill walking and things, this is the thing. You just buy a tent, get a set of boots, and go. Just go. Take a lot of money though, because you know every 13 miles or so, there's a bar or a hotel, and it's great. Now here's the thing: I've known people who actually did the West Highland Way and never stayed in their tent. They you know, they'd arranged to stay the night in this hotel or whatever on the way, and they were just, and that's great, because if you pick the right times, you get great entertainment. You go in, there'd be a Scottish band on or something, and it's marvellous. And that's a great holiday for, I think, for guys. Guys trying to, like, you know, picture some. Anyone could do it. I'm not saying. But say you got your college mates or whatever, and you want to do the West Highland Way. It's an achievement, you know. It's an achievement to see you've done it. It goes all the way from Mulgai in Glasgow, and it's right up the West Highlands. So, you know, right away up there to Fort William. Fantastic scenery, absolutely fantastic. You see some incredible sights. I mean, it's like all the funny thing about it is all the pictures you see on, you know, touristy things. I would say most of them come from that area, because it takes you through the Trossachs and onto the Highlands, through Glencoe. Really beautiful. But the Trossachs are a place that I know well, and you know, I kind of miss it. That's beautiful. A place you can lose yourself for a long time. The only thing I would say is take care on the Rannoch Moor, and it's because when you travel, make sure you've got. In fact, I could tell you what to do. Get one of those hats with the netting thing, because the midges. Oh my God, the midges on the Rannoch Moor in the wrong season, in the June, July, August, the midges will eat you to bits. They just eat you. These things just swarm at you. Tiny little. Don't know what a midgie is. I couldn't tell you. It's a Scotch midgie. It's just awful. And the Rannoch Moor seems to be the most evil, twisted midges on the planet. This is insane. I mean, I used to do a lot of fishing when I was a kid with my dad, and we'd put midgie cream on all over our face and hands and all that. And you think that's going to save you? These things bite your eye. They go and they bite your eye, and you go, ow! And obviously you got midgie cream all over you. You can't touch your eye, because that's worse, because it's going to sting. You know, but the best thing is to get one of those hats. You get this great hat and it's got a netting all around it, and those do work. Crazy, like it's look like a beekeeper or something. But for hill walking, it's an invaluable thing. Now, in hill walking, you shouldn't see midges. Just places like the Rannoch Moor, which are fabulous places to see. Don't get me wrong, fabulous. But just beware of the midges. In the wrong season, they are lethal. Little buggers. But there's another thing about the West Highland Way. You've got to talked about this in one of my other videos. You've got to beware of. You know, you're walking. Basically, you're walking through the middle of someone's land. You've got perfectly legal right to do it. It's an established right of way. Don't worry about it. You can do it. But be wary that some of the land are actually grouse moors. And in the wrong season, there's actually people out there shooting grouse, you know. And they go, so you got, ew, I've just bagged a fezzy. Ooh, boom. All these crazy hooray Henrys with the shotguns. And they're there, believe me, they are there. And but you're marching through this guy's land onto the next pub or hotel. So, but it's a great experience if you ever. I'll tell you what, if you were trying to tour Scotland on the cheap, that would be it. I would say, just go West Highland Way, get a tent, and just go there. You'll have a blast. You know, just do it. And I don't think you can find it now. Maybe on the internet, but there was a famous musician and BBC Scotland broadcaster Jimmy McGregor. He did He did walking. I think the show was called Walking the West Highland Way or something. And he did a show on it. Although he cheated because he was using a helicopter. Get to the next filming location. It's he kind of cheated, which annoyed a lot of people. Not a lot of people in Scotland, but the show's good. Don't get me wrong, the show's good. There's a lot of highlights of things you can see. But I think they should remake that with someone else today and have them actually do the entire walk. Obviously edit it down. It would take takes you a week to do it. But hey, I think realistic target's 113 miles. I've known someone. I know a guy who ran it. He ran it, and he actually ran all the way. I wouldn't do it. I mean, he did it over like 3 or 4 days. I don't know exactly, some ridiculous time. But that's just insane. You don't want to do that. That is, I mean, hey, stop and smell the coffee. Why are you doing this? About the distances, or is it about the scenery? Because Scotland's not a place you should travel through quickly. You should travel slowly and absorb the beauty of it. Same as anywhere. And there's a lot of beauty, believe me, in the West Highland Way. On the West Highland Way. A lot of fantastic places to see. But not just there, I mean the whole country. And another thing I'd like to say, going off the topic now, is because we are well off the topic of whiskey, I think. A lot of people who visit Scotland rush to the Highlands. They rush to the Highlands. They think, oh, Scotland's the Highlands. They get into Glasgow or Edinburgh Airport and they think, oh, I must go to the Highlands. That's where it all is. And granted, a lot of it is there. My ancestry are both Highland and Lowland Scots, so I can honestly say that I have a foot in Nairn and a foot in Dumfries, and so that's how it looks. And because my family are obviously a border Reiver family, the Reivers are a law unto their own historically. It's quite late in the day when the actual borders were established and they divided many families one side or the other. But so I can honestly say that. But my grandmother's family are Highlanders, all right away back. Mackenzies of Redcastle, the Prairie, and the Mackays, right? So all there, and the McGregors, it's all there. And I think it's the case for most Scots today. There was a time when, the Highlands and the Lowlands were divided almost like two nations. Not now, not for a long, long time. We've been, and partly because of the diaspora of the Highlands, a lot of things were forced and people had to move to cities like Dundee or Glasgow or Edinburgh. And obviously intermarriage would happen when all that stuff with the people there. And so we are... I put it down as a rich tapestry of different people, Scots and Picts, Scots, Norsemen. Our ancestors are many people, and the Scots are actually quite a small tribe on the west coast, believe it or not, from which the whole country takes a name. Not going to give you a history lesson here, Kenneth MacAlpine and all that stuff. Not going to do that. But the Scots were Irish. They were originally Irish people. And the Picts are the true Scots, and the Brittonic Celts in the borders, Dumfries, Galloway. The Brittonic Celts, of course, stretched all the way down into Wales. We're talking about the time of Arthur of the Britons and things like that. And then, of course, there was the Danes, the Jutish Danes, who had a kingdom from Edinburgh down into about Yorkshire. On the East Coast, many different tribal people. It's not a straight cut case, as a lot of people want to argue, or it certainly has many things. And I think most Scots have all of that as their ancestry, and there's a good reason for that. Before I go too far in this, and there's a good reason for that, and the reason would be the Black Plague, which came across Europe and killed millions of people. And after the plague, there was only 400,000 people survived in Scotland. So imagine that. Only 400,000 people. All the people of Scots descent today descend from those 400,000. Imagine that. Unless, of course, maybe there's a good chance, perhaps their ancestor left before the plague. I doubt that, though. I think if you, in the general diaspora from Scotland, you could honestly say that all people of Scots descent today are descended from those 400,000 people. It's pretty much an Adam and Eve story. And that's a strange anomaly because, and this is everywhere, so don't want to make my heaters drive me mad. This is a diaspora. This is an interesting thing again. Is that it means that your ancestor can be your ancestor many times down different lines, which is a weird thing to consider. I don't know how many times I hit Robert the Bruce, King Robert the Bruce down my lines. Quite a few times. He's my ancestor so many times I'm practically him. Do you know? I mean, it's like so. And, and then you think of another case of thing, a Scottish thing where clans tend to live as clans, and generally you probably find yourself 200 years ago marrying your cousin. And so there's a lot of inbreeding, if you like. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's true. So pretty much we're going back to what I said earlier about us all being Jock Thompson's bairns. It's all true. It's all true. It's like a lot of people say. I used to look at people. You get a new president in the USA, and they say, "Oh, 20 centuries ago, 20 generations ago, he shared an ancestor with the Queen." Every time there's a new president in the USA, they go back to some mad thing like that, and you think, okay. And they did it with the Duchess Meghan recently, and had her going back to Robert the Bruce. Well, her and everyone else, I mean, I don't doubt that. Maybe she probably does. Probably does. If you hit one Scottish ancestor, we probably all do. And it's I don't know. You find Robert the Bruce is your ancestor 100 times or something. It's kind of bizarre, So, but this is true. So, I think in my family, I've certainly noticed this as a Wilson. That's my name, and whenever I meet people in the world of that name, there's something exists of the clandom of it. And I want to say that in Scottish terms. Don't mistake it for some American horrible thing. No, clans are families in Scotland. We are. It's a very legitimate, honest thing. It's like it's family. It's historical for us. It's not. It's based on extended family, basically, and land. The lands that were inhabited by such clans, that would be. It's something very old, and you just feel it. If you belong to these things, if you belong to one, my family, we are a chiefly family. We're a border family, but it's considered chiefly because we are armigers. We have coat of arms. So our ancestor was a baron, barons of Croglan. So that's a chiefly family. So they are no different from a clan chieftain in the eyes of the Lord Lion, who is the head of the Armigerous court. Armigerous. He's the guy who decides whether you've got the right to bear. Let's get that right as well. Not to be confused with the American terms. To bear arms, to own arms, to be, and I don't mean firearms. I mean coats of arms. It's up to the Lord Lion. He is the guy. The Queen appoints him to run his court, and it is a very legal thing. So you see how it's entrenched in our culture. Sadly, there's people mistake that for some kind of a them and us, rich and poor thing, but it's not the case at all. And that's the thing about family, clans, things like that. We are one family, and if you look back far enough, you'll find they're all intermarried. So I suppose that's what basically makes a nation. So there you are. I always often find it sad that Scotland, we're divided against we divide ourselves by things like religion and things like that, when truth is we should be working as one people, and that's always been a sad thing for me. in Glasgow, where I come from, you get one crowd, well, both crowds basically, and they have a hatred of each other, and Scots fighting Scots for over some soccer teams or whatever. Stupid, really stupid. Divide and conquer. I think that's what it is. So my family were there with the Bruce. My ancestor is the Bruce. But my actual clan, or family, because we're Border clan, we came down through Kirkpatrick of Closeburn, who was the Bruce's right hand man. So let's just say I'm entrenched in the whole thing. And of course, Kirkpatrick was the first cousin of Sir William Wallace. So I think that's my credentials as a Scotsman. I don't. You can tell that I obviously have opinions, realistic opinions. There was then and there's now, and we have to go forward as a nation as best we can. It's different times. I mean, someone asked me one time, if you were back, if it was back in the day. This is an interesting question, and this is interesting because I don't want to say too much here because someone close to me said the opposite. You see, and I said one thing, he said the opposite, and it was like if it was 1745 all over again or 1744 and Bonnie Prince Charlie landed, would you follow him? And I said yes, I would. And that's the difference. And my other family member said absolutely not. So there you are. I don't think much has changed in 300 years. We're still enemies. Still our own best enemies. And I said yes, I would. I think it's about Scottish history. Sadly, I think there's a lot unsaid about Scottish history, or a lot rather unsaid about it. The current administration like history that flatters them and proves the point, and it's just not like that. I mean, I look at the Bishops' Wars in the 1600s, 17th century. My family were deeply involved in a terrible time, and yet some people want to deny that even happened. I mean, it's not a denial. It's just like let's just ignore that 100 years. Let's just ignore the run up to the 715 rebellion, and let's just ignore it because it doesn't suit their principles. Now, I think that's wrong. And I also argue that a lot of things are wrong because you have to accept that people changed, from one century to another, and fought oppression. And in the War of the Bishops, where you have the Presbyterians, Covenanters, and Roman Catholics being oppressed. They're being oppressed by the Church of England, the Anglicans, or Episcopals as they call themselves today. It's how can you look at that? I mean, when I say oppressed, I mean we're talking about people being murdered for their religion, being put to death, like the martyr Margaret Wilson, one of my lot. She was drowned in the Solway tied to a stake until the tide came in because she would not renounce her religion. She would not renounce her religion, Presbyterianism, and accept this other religion, the Church of England. Is that right? Should we hide from that bit of history, or should we confront it? Should we hide from it because it doesn't suit some people's opinions and it's sitting in Hollywood today? I don't think so. Not at all. This is very much part of history, and the day that we can look at all our history and embrace it, the good and the bad, just maybe we might come together as a people and get something done that have been at war with one another. Hey, you saw it when you came in here. You got a Scotsman drinking whiskey. It wasn't going to go well. It was, you're going to get my opinions on it. You're going to get my opinions on what's wrong with my nation today, and. And I look at people and I think, don't you see the bigger picture? Don't you see that the world has moved on a bit? Don't you see it? The world's moved on. It's a big world. We can't be insular anymore. We've got to look out. Let's look to the world. Let's look to the whole world. And our neighbour is England, and Ireland, and France, and beyond. And we have to look at those people and work with them and be with them and be part of it. That's how I see it. We look at our neighbours across the ocean and reach out to Scots in all the countries of the world, Australia, America, Canada, and be something new. I think that's what gets me about the current administration in Scotland. They're just caught in this tunnel vision thing. Personally, I think they just like taking the expenses for the job they're in. Nothing gets done. Even when they push one agenda, either do it or don't do it. But when they just fan the flames of discontentment, in my opinion, never actually, so we're reaching a point where in this world where we need to stop being so insular. It's beyond that. It's beyond our borders. And it's odd, to find people like this with so entrenched opinions, and yet they tell you first and foremost that they welcome incomers. Well, I argued I was a member of the SNP for a few years, and I'm not a member today because I changed my opinions. That's how it is. As you're allowed to grow. I grew up. I was in my college years. I was a member of the SNP and the Federation of Student Nationalists, and I totally accepted the part of the Scotland could play, but it was a disillusionment with the people in charge and how they were running the country. But so what I'm saying is basically this. Well, as Scots, we have to go forward and be something different and reach out to the world. It's not be insular. And what I said to this guy was this. He was talking about migrants coming to Scotland. He said, we need migrants. We need people to come here and work. And I said, fair enough. I said, so what if it was a million Englishmen? What if a million Englishmen said they want to come and live in Scotland and be taxpayers and work for a living? Oh, he was angry. Boy, was he angry. Oh my God. He would take a million people from anywhere else in the world, but not from England. And I said to him, why not? Why not? Why is that not? Why is that acceptable, your opinion? Why can't, if someone said to me, I look at my family. I have family living in England, and they're accepted, and they do that. And there's a lot of English people living in Scotland, don't get me wrong, and I've known a few there who are totally accepted and part of the community. But this guy's so entrenched in his belief that he couldn't honestly imagine a million English people moving north. Well, this is what's absolutely incredibly wrong with that opinion, because if you look at historical facts, like King David, who was the King of Scotland, he was the king at the beginning of the Scottish boroughs. He invented them. He was a very forward-looking person, and he actually said to Scott, his idea was to welcome people from all nations, and he actually set up the boroughs, and everybody who came to live in the towns would be a burgher and get an allotment of land and property, and he would get a job, and it was almost like his own little franchise. And King David sent out to all over Europe. He had people came to live there from far away. I mean, it's like a lot of English people and Welshmen, and that's why we have so many different names in Scotland today. A lot of people miss this, and this is another piece of history some people would like to just dismiss as it never happened. But King David was a very forward-thinking person, and a true believer in immigration, would you believe? So there you go. And he would be quite happy if they came from England, and a lot of people did, with the promise of freedom, the right to vote and hold own property, and it's just insane. And the franchise of citizen, that's what's interesting about that. They're very, very forward thinking. I mean, to be thinking like that, like 700 years ago. I mean, this is incredible. Incredible piece of history. But I digress. So we've talked for an hour now. I've probably bored the pants off you, but I told you my few things that annoy me and a few things that I like. And I want to say, /var, whoever you are, whether you support independence in Scotland or whether you don't, I'd like someday for us all to get together and come to some kind of agreement for going forward. Is that too much to ask? I think we're going to have to, as far as Scots go, we're going to have to stop fighting amongst ourselves. That's the first thing. We can do that. Just maybe there's hope. Cheers.